and we are live streamed, and I want to welcome everybody. And the study session is for the purpose of going over the policy, rules, resolutions, and the changes in some policy recommendations. So we'll be discussing those tonight, and with that, I think we're going to have Dr. Remendini start us off.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the study session. You might recall that back last spring, before we went into school shutdown, we began the process as a district of doing an entire policy manual review process, and that was supported by the Arizona School Boards Association. And so we had a representative from there go through each and every one of our policies, regulations, and exhibits, and make recommended changes for the board to consider. The good thing about the Wickenburg Unified School District Governing Board, one of the many, is that we've stayed on top of the policies over the course of the year, so there weren't very many changes. However, prior to the end of last school year, former Superintendent Dr. Carlson worked with Lynn to review the policy changes and did a real thorough cleanup of what was recommended from ASBA, so that we were able to take those notes and present you with the policies that you see tonight. Most of the changes are in actual regulations, and as you will recall, board members don't approve regulations, but we want your input and feedback. Those tell us how to do the work of the policies, and then the exhibits are providing us with the tools for there. So, Mr. President, if you'd like to just go through item by item, or if you would like to kind of skip down to the ones where I received comments or questions from, or open it up to the board.
I think, first of all, we'll see. I'd like to skip down to where we need to be, but does anybody, before we start that, we all had conversation with Dr. Remendini. Does anybody have any discussion that they thought of after the fact that you want to bring up first at this point, or can we go down to the parts where we had discussion with her?
Yep, I'm good with that.
Are you good with that?
We all said what we had to say.
I think you're right. So why don't we do that, Dr.
Okay,
Remendini?
and then I will just jump in here on the policies that agree, the regulations that outlined any procedures for the district to respond to a complaint or a filing of a grievance. We added the timeline in on those. Those were all regulations for your information. We did increase the timeline. We recommend an increase in the timeline for the district to respond, primarily because we're a small district and we have minimal staff to take care of those. So each one of those are the same throughout all of those timelines, whether they be for complaints or sexual harassment. So the first policy to, yes?
Oh, no, I just said because that sexual harassment, I believe, was 3 days.
Yeah, and there's no legislative requirement for that timeline, so we were able to kind of help ourselves out a little bit there. Hopefully we won't ever get those, but just in case we do, we want to meet our policy, our regulation. The first policy, ADB, Principles of Good Education, there were a couple of comments. This policy is actually, I don't want to say it's optional, because they're all optional in theory, but this is one that really is very transparent in our governing board presenting to the public about what we believe to be our duties and responsibilities towards children. And there were no recommended policy changes from the Arizona School Boards Association member that looked through this for us. But a couple of the board members mentioned in the very last paragraph, and I believe you have a hard copy of this in case it's not in front of you. It begins with each student shall have the right to, and then it lists a number of things. And a couple of board members brought up the idea of that flexibility of thought and conduct, with the discussion maybe centering around what does that actually mean, and is that really what we agree to. So I'll just make that statement and then let the board have questions or comments and make recommendations should there be any for us to change that. That is a policy, so it would need to be changed. If there's changes to it, it would need to be changed. The change would need to be mentioned during the action item at the board meeting later tonight, so we can get it as a first read and then move forward with the second read.
Which one is that again?
So it's policy ADB, and it's probably on about page 5, right at the bottom.
Correct.
You do have a hard copy of it in front of you.
No,
No,
just
just Joe. Okay, I apologize. Okay.
Okay, you're looking at me?
So,
It's page
Yes.
5 on the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last paragraph.
Okay, my concern was what did flexibility, not so much of thought, but of conduct mean? That just seemed like you're opening up a can of worms that, well, your conduct is flexible. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be destructive. I mean, it just seemed like a strange sentence to me.
and I see where you're coming from, and I
Sandy's
agree.
breaking up real bad. I can just get about every third word out of her. Everybody else seems to be okay, but I can't hear her.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What I said was, where it says flexibility of thought and conduct, I'm not so upset about the flexibility of thought, because we all have our own thoughts, but the flexibility of conduct just kind of left me cold, because I really didn't know what that meant. I mean, we're going to allow them to act however they want, or, you know, it just seemed like a strange thing to have in there.
Well, yeah, and I think that whole paragraph's kind of strange as written anyway. I'm not sure how the district can ensure that they have the right and opportunity to economic security, while they're in school. That's, kind of the home thing. I mean, and so, I don't know, the whole paragraph is kind of strangely written in that sense to me. We can provide them acquisition, the opportunity for acquisition of skills and, critical understanding and appreciation of values and, development, help them with their development, personal initiative and all those kind of things. But, the other parts I wasn't quite sure of as far as physical, economic, and mental security.
I agree, it's all kind of out there.
My interpretation of that, Ron, is that, and this is just my interpretation, is that opportunity for physical security would mean that we are going to make sure we're going to do our due diligence as far as security of the building and have people on staff that are going to take care of the students. Maybe I'm not reading that, that's the way I read that. As far as the economic security one, I'm not 100% why that would be in there, but I think it's has to do more with Aaron's department and make sure that we have the monies coming in and each student equally has credit, or we get credit for that person. That's how I read that one when I was first reading this at home. So I don't know if somebody wants to ad lib or elaborate, on that.
My look, I was looking at it as, we were getting the money for the students in the district. I was looking at that as the student had the right and the opportunity for economic security, which I agree they should have the right and the opportunity for economic security, but not from the district, other than the district providing them the means to be able to achieve that upon graduation.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah, I think the whole paragraph is kind of wampus.
I believe this paragraph was actually written as what we believe students have the rights and opportunity to pursue, whether in school or out of school. I agree with the statements about, is this something we are committing to providing for them? And if so, there might be some things that maybe we don't agree with. But I think overall it's our belief statement about what people have the right and opportunity for.
So I just looked up on the School Board Association website. We're the only school school district that has this, that's part of ASBA.
There are
right?
some other school districts that have it in a different form.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they,
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm,
So,
absolutely.
and they have a more generic format that doesn't, don't get me wrong, a lot of this is great and I like it, but at the same time, do we want to move to something that may
Reword
more
it.
similar to what other school districts have, or do we want to just stay with this format? That would be my only suggestion.
And at this point, you're talking about just that paragraph? Or
No, it's the
policy?
principles of good education. It's, so I just looked it up for at a couple other school districts just to compare. And most of them is just a page with several paragraphs. I mean, it's all similar, but none of them have that verbiage at all. So it just might be something we want to pull and then compare to what other districts have maybe, and, or, I don't know, up to you guys, what you think.
Well, I'm all for not approving it the way it is.
So our choices would be to recommend during the first read to pull it completely and readdress it later, or to recommend modifications and go forward with the first read and then a second read at the February meeting, or pull it, do first read at the, whatever. This policy, and typically it is very, like I said, it's optional, but not really. I mean, they're all optional, but this one is really written very individually when it is adopted by boards. So that's why there's no recommendations from ASBA.
Okay?
I have no problem with pulling it totally and reworking it, because we're gonna have the brunt of everything hopefully completed in our first read, except for possibly this one, if you guys want to pull.
Yeah, I'm good with
Yeah.
that. I think we probably can do that, or for our first read, pull it. And
Yeah.
we can hold off.
I concur.
Okay? So you'll make note of that during the regular meeting?
Yes.
And then I will ask for help in wording it. Because this is board policy and, whatever the recommendations or whatever, how you want to handle that, okay?
Right.
Okay, policy BDA is the next policy, and it is on board organizational meetings. And there were some questions about the ASBA, and remember, anything the ASBA recommends, we will let you know if it's required due to legislative action or if it's a recommendation based on their legal advice or good practice, however they word this one. And BDA is the board organizational meeting, and there was a recommendation to add a statement that allows a board to elect a board president at any time for any reason, providing that the matter has been properly placed and noticed on the board. The main purpose that I can get for this one is that it provides some flexibility for the board to make a change in leadership, whether the board president no longer wants to serve or not able to serve, but doesn't want to step down and completely vacate the policy. But it's outside of the organizational meeting, so
You mean vacate the
vacate
board?
without vacating the
President,
board.
yeah, right.
Yeah, you could step down from being president without vacating the board. Obviously, if you vacate the board, you vacate the presidency, which requires somebody to come in. So, anyway.
And I'm okay with that,
Yeah, I think so.
because
as long as
anything can happen to
ASBA's
anybody.
Mhm.
And, there may be a time when somebody's ill or whatever, and we need to do that, so I'm fine with it.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. The next
Good.
section, okay, sorry, Ron, I went on without listening to you. So the next section is a number of exhibits, BEC, and this is the legal requirement for us to post, publicly post our meetings. We currently meet the legal requirement for posting our meetings. Lynn is good at that. These are exhibits that just provide documents for us for guidance. And we would like to move forward with these exhibits. They're for your information. We want to be sure that anybody that comes after us.
Comes after us?
What is the right word for that? That comes after us has the tools they need to make sure they're doing everything accurately. Right now, they look very redundant, and there's some that don't even apply to us because we don't currently have advisory committees or subcommittees of the board, but that could happen in the future, so we're just being a little bit proactive in getting those on there. We did, during the read, notice a few typos and some phone numbers that maybe should not have been in there, and we'll clean those up before we add them to our policy manual to make sure they accurately represent each of those types and the communication that comes from that goes to the community.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot too with Lynn maybe retiring sometime soon.
No, no, she's
Each
not.
year we
Don't
find
say that out
she's
loud,
extended it, so.
ever,
Not
again.
that
But I
soon.
think it helps, for any predecessor.
Where are the board?
Very tired
I mean, where are
until
the
she
page
tells me when I
numbers
have to get
on
my.
You know what, if you go to the very top, if you kind of let it float up to the top, let your mouth,
Oh, okay.
mouse open,
So look at page 12 in that case, now that I
Okay.
know what page I'm looking at.
Okay.
okay.
And this is a typo thing, maybe somebody caught this before. Wickenburg Unified School District 39.
Oh, does it really say
Sorry,
39?
fat fingers.
39, I don't have,
I'll fix it.
where are you?
In the, underneath, on page 12 at the bottom of it, where
Oh, the
it's
bottom.
dated, and then it says Wickenburg Unified School District.
Oh,
All by
yeah,
itself.
39 instead of number 9.
I
Oh,
didn't
there we
notice
go.
it
Got
until
it.
just now.
That's really interesting there, okay.
Just fat fingers, not.
That 3 was supposed to be a pound sign.
Exactly.
Okay, not picking, just finding.
Thank
No,
you.
it's good.
It is the
See?
pound though symbol. It is,
Yeah.
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 Oh, that's what it was, okay. Oh, good catch there.
Got to pound.
I do appreciate the fact that
There it is.
each of the board members read these a little bit differently because you find different things. And Lynn and I read these. I found, in my Google Forms, I found like 7 or 8 iterations of my notes to Lynn. And guys, they're this long in pages from the first one that we kept doing. So we did, it's not like we rushed through these, I'm just telling you. I apologize for the errors. Okay, the next policy is BEDF, and that was just probably just an update. It had been a while since this had been updated to allow for abstentions for a board member that may need to abstain from voting either for lack of knowledge of the item or a conflict of interest. That one's pretty straightforward. There's a few in there. The next exhibit we take out because we no longer have paper copies of our board packet. Is that one?
Yay.
Yeah. No questions came from DBI budget implementation, just some cleanup of some language there. So I'll just keep going through these. Same thing from DEC was just a cross-reference, no questions there. The Ds went through pretty quickly. They were just mostly cleanup language. So now we're at policy, page 23, EGAD, E-G-E-A-D, and that's what I think every time I saw this one. And that's a copyright compliance, and there was some, this has nothing to do with what happened, anything that happened in Wickenburg, but there is a big push to make sure that parent-teacher associations and those kinds of groups that work with us are not using our printing or those kinds of things because we can't give preference to them, nor can we give a gift of public funds. So this is general language added to that one. Okay, policy FF. That one we put in the pocket and the packet, and everybody had conversation about that one. This is naming of facilities. You've been provided a document of our current policy without the red line, the red lines or the blue lines with the recommendations. So this is what the policy looks like of date, and you will notice that our policy does not have any restrictions on who we could name a facility after. The ASBA did recommend that we add deceased and deceased for 10 years. So lots of comments from all of the governing board members that this may not be in line with what we do in Wickenburg or what we believe about naming facilities or areas for the building.
And I take it these were recommendations from ASBA?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
that's just recommendations?
Yeah, it's just
Cool.
recommendation.
Yeah,
There is
we don't
no
have to
need
do
to
it.
change this policy. You can completely pull it, leave it as is. You can modify what's here, whatever.
I really like what we currently have, as vague as it is, because of the fact that we want vague, because each case will be individualized.
Right.
And Sandy and I were on the board when we went through this.
That's what I was telling her. I said, we've been through this and, if somebody's dead for 10 years, I might not even remember who it was,
Yeah.
and
Is there
who
some
wants to be
reason,
honored
is
when
there
you're
some
dead
reason
for 10 years?
they say, 10 years?
I don't know why they say 10 years, Ron. I know a lot of people have adopted this, but there's a lot bigger districts in a lot more metropolitan areas, and they have a lot more facilities, and they want to make sure there's some process for going through the motions of naming them is what I've experienced in other districts, and you do have to wait, and sometimes they wait to name a baseball field until the anniversary date, and they do it, and that's fine, but that doesn't seem to be what we do in Wickenburg.
No.
So-
No.
Nor do I want to.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't either.
And Ron, when I discussed this, I actually mentioned like the Navy naming ships and stuff, and I says, I don't even think John McCain was even buried yet or whatever when they decided to name a ship after him, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
I
know, I just
think,
feel
I
it's
mean,
something,
his dad had one, you know, so.
if somebody's gonna name something after
And
me,
his granddad
I
had
would like to be
one.
alive to know that they
Yeah.
Yeah.
thought enough of me to name something after me.
Well, and that's what I was talking to Dr. Remendini about as well. It's like,
And why
you
do
know,
they
if-
even have to be deceased?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm in favor, just my own self, of keeping what we currently have.
Yep, I
That
agree.
keeps
I
local
agree.
control for Little Wickenburg,
I agree.
you know.
I agree.
So
Yeah, I don't
we'll,
have any problem. That's fine.
so during action, one of you will pull that off of first read. Okay, perfect. Okay, the next one is another one, timeline for equal opportunity employment. Again, there were a few of those. I'm going to try to go quickly through these. I had no questions in the G sections, even though there were quite a few of them. The smoking by staff members and the use of tobacco has been updated, and we really need to follow those to make sure that we cover ourselves for playgrounds. The staff use of digital communications, I did have a couple of questions about this. GBEF, we want to clarify that the way Jeremy and our technology team have set up our use of digital devices, if I log into my own personal device and go into our Google, I've accepted this, the district has the restrictions, and I've accepted this as a usable, as an approved device. So a teacher in particular, if they are logging into their Google Classroom from their own phone, it's still a district technology because it's our Google login.
I have a question with that.
And
That makes
if
sense.
Jeremy may want to run in here and answer this question.
Yeah. So
Jeremy?
The question I have with that is, if the teacher working remotely with their student or virtually, they text one another, because I know they have the texting numbers, with what Barbara just mentioned, logging in to Google on her own device, if the teacher texts the student, is there a masked phone number that comes across, or are they getting that teacher's personal cell phone number?
If a teacher is texting from their personal phone, then they're getting their personal phone number.
Okay,
A lot of teachers don't want to text from their personal phone for that reason.
right, and they shouldn't, that's my opinion,
it's
that's
just-
what I say about that, is they shouldn't have that, because that's where you're could potentially cross a line, you know? So how about, when I look at the virtual stuff, and I wish I would have brought a better example, brought an example at all, is there is a phone number when the teacher sends out to the parents and so forth. Oh, good. About the, they have a Google phone number or something. Or is that their cell phone number?
Well, there are, if they're sending from an app, you can have an app that sends text messages that would be separate from their personal number.
Okay,
So it really depends on how the teacher is sending the message.
okay,
If the teacher sends the message from their personal phone with their personal text messages, then it's going to show their personal text message number.
okay.
If they're sending it through an app, I think, I can't remember what the app, Remind maybe, or there was an app where,
Remind
You
and
can-
Dojo and some
yeah,
of
you
the
can
other
send
ones.
text messages through the app.
Okay,
But it
And
has its
that is
own,
not-
yeah.
That's a number that's reserved specific for that app and that user. And in the same way, Blackboard, our parent link, parent communication can send text messages. And when it comes up, it's like a 5-digit number, I think it is what it shows. So it can, the number that it comes from is really based on what they choose to use.
Okay,
Right.
well, that makes sense, I appreciate that.
I was just gonna say, so kind of like they use an app, like, for my daughter, we have Stuco,
Okay.
and it just comes across as Stuco, and it comes from the advisor. And then there's another one that I'm on, that's yearbook, and it's titled, Walter Peak Yearbook. And so,
Okay.
and it's the advisors that are texting, but it's not with their personal number at all.
So they're going through that app and it doesn't show their
Right.
number?
And I can't see anybody else's either. So
Yeah.
they
Right.
send it out as a group, but I don't see all the other numbers.
Because I've used Class Dojo when we were at Hacienda. I use Remind at the high school. So, okay, all right.
Yeah, and
Covers
as,
that,
and as
thank
far as I know, most teachers would then have to have personal student contact information, and they don't typically do that either. They typically just, I think, email through Google Classroom or notify through Google Classroom. So then there's no actual texting involved.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, we do have conduct policies that address the misuse of technology. If a teacher a staff member should misuse this policy, then it is something that we could then follow up and make sure they understand they should not have done that.
So let me
And-
ask you, Jeremy, so if they text off their phone, as long as they use an app to do the texting, even though it's their personal phone, then it won't show.
Right, because you're downloading an app to your phone, and it kind of overrides that. It's
Yeah.
how Remind does,
Yes.
the other ones that you talked about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do all the teachers know that, though?
Yes,
Aware of that? They do.
yes.
I think the teachers that would be interested in texting do. A lot of teachers just, they don't care, they've not asked. They may or may not know about it, but the ones that actually are communicating through text messages like that, they know and they've asked to see what options there are. So it largely depends on what the teacher wants to do. Many teachers just don't want to text. Like, that's just not, they don't think that's a way they want to communicate, so.
Okay.
One other thing I noticed we did a line out on BlackBerry. I thought I'd heard that BlackBerry was doing some kind of smartphone technology. They're having new, I knew a lot of people thought BlackBerry went away, but I thought I may have heard something last year.
I think
BlackBerry
they've
was-
gone away as a platform, and now they are running Android. So it would
through
be,
Android.
it would be Android or Apple, and BlackBerry would be like, you have a Samsung, a BlackBerry,
Oh, right.
a Motorola, just a
Samsung's
brand
a
of phone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Android.
Well,
Okay,
my
got it.
Blackberry.
Not a problem.
I'll
Okay,
go to my-
that's good.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay. The next one is a policy, GCB, professional staff contracts and compensation. That was just updating the language to make sure we do it every year. No questions on that one. Was pretty simple. GCCA, professional and support staff sick leave, was just to add the required statute about who a family member is, and that is a required change because Arizona Revised Statute 23-371 required that change. I believe that's all on that one. And then GCCGR is one that is, we added in as our own, as a regulation. This is one that's really of current need, and that's to modify our sick leave bank regulation to allow others to donate to those who may have to quarantine or isolate due to sickness, primarily to COVID at this point, but you will notice it doesn't say COVID in there. But if the district requires somebody to isolate or quarantine and they are out of leave, we want to keep them earning a paycheck, and we can ask for donations outside.
One question, didn't we do a special sick leave thing for COVID?
So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act was passed back in April, I believe. It expired in December 30th. And it was not renewed. And the truth about that act was it was an unfunded mandate for public education. So we had to offer it, but we had no recourse for
Funding.
recuperating that funding.
Mm.
So it was, we could have continued it, but looking at it, the long-term sustainability of it, we could continue it through March 30th, but quite honestly, the funding of that could be huge. And we found this way our employees are very generous to each other. And we thought this would be the best way to ensure that staff members who need to quarantine that may be out of leave have access to it for any reason, not just what was outlined in the FFCRA.
Yeah, I kind of
No,
had the
thanks for
same.
the clarification
Yeah.
on that, because I didn't
Yeah,
remember
because
that.
I had the same
Yeah.
question as
Yeah.
Randy, because I did think there was something. You would think some of this funding that they've given us would have applied to that.
You would think.
You know, because if you're requiring someone to be out for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
I mean,
And not even knowing if they are actually
yeah,
positive.
yeah.
Right.
You know, it is a little bit odd that, you know, the federal government or the state would mandate things and not fund them. That's not usual.
That's unusual.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, right. Right.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
huh.
Okay.
Okay.
I just,
Fund schools.
just a comment there, you know, you saying they're mandated quarantine for 2 weeks, but is it, I mean, if it's, you know, like a district person or something, they can work from home, I guess, but, you know, as far as teachers, do they have that opportunity of working from home?
Yes, and our our learning working pathways does allow for any of our staff members to continue working during quarantine and isolation. During quarantine, if they're able to, isolation if they're able to, and they're well enough to do so. We do have a very few number of staff members that their job cannot be done remotely, and so we want to make sure we have something to cover them. Our teachers have been able during quarantine to teach remotely in many cases, and so we've been able to keep people working. We just want to make sure that we don't impact anybody's paycheck during this time if we can avoid it. So yes, working and learning continues as in all cases. This covers those cases where it cannot.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. The next policy is just bereavement leave, just clarifies we do offer paid bereavement leave. And then the professional staff hiring is just a reference check. It's just an exhibit to help our hiring administrators conduct a proper reference check and don't ask questions that might get us into trouble. And then,
Can I just ask?
yes,
a
you
quick
can
question?
always interrupt me and ask questions because I'm just trying to speed through the ones that I didn't get
Yeah.
questions to
Right,
during the
and-
conversation.
And I thought of this when I was going through it,
Uh-huh.
and then I forgot about it.
Uh-huh.
So when they get these 4 days of bereavement, is that taken out of their sick pay thing?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're not really giving them bereavement, they have to use their sick time. Okay, and the reason I ask that is because where I worked, we were given 3 days of bereavement that had nothing to do with
Yeah.
our sick
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so when I read that, I thought, well, you're not really giving them anything because you're making them use their
Sick.
vacation time.
It's reclassifying their sick time because you have to be sick to use sick time.
Okay,
Or, I mean, somebody in your family has to be.
okay,
And I
Just another category of the sick time.
yeah, okay. Okay,
Okay, let's see, where are we here? I believe we are just at arrangement for substitutes. That was just an update of something that allowed for us to make sure that somebody can return to, let us know they're returning. Very simple change to make, and that's a regulation, just to make sure our employees know that if they know when they're coming back, they need to tell us when they're coming back. And then the next one is a policy, and it is GCQF. And this is, it didn't get any questions on this one, but this is down in step 2 of a suspension or dismissal. And that change allows the governing board to hear, to hold the hearing itself, without requiring a hearing officer. And there may come a time where we have a dismissal or a suspension that is not as contentious as it would need to have a hearing officer, and the board then would hold the hearing. And there is obviously regulations that and guidance in this policy to say how that hearing would go. It does not prohibit the board from determining a hearing officer would hear those items. So, okay. Sometimes human resources issues, the board chooses to hear. Okay?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And then there's some timelines added to that one as well. And then we are at GDJ, which is assignments and transfers, and that's cleaning up the language. This language cleanup allows the district to place its staff where it needs to be placed without, it just cleans up the language, makes it a little bit easier to say the district will hire you and place you where you're needed. And then GDQB is the same, is a similar one for, well, it's a resignation of support staff, just requiring updating the language for notice. The regulation for pregnant, parenting students, pregnant and parenting students, IHBCA, is a very simple change, just telling them they do not have to consult a member of the counseling staff, but they can if they want to. We have those services. Class size for special education, we wanted to update. We have a new program here. This was primarily to update the language from A to paraprofessional and to account for our new program, the EDP for the emotionally disabled students in the private placement. So we have some guidelines there, and again, that's a regulation. Okay, graduating seniors, they have 6 classes, so that was just an update on their course load. Those things happen when we change schedules and calendar days and graduation requirements. Honor roll needed to be updated from grades 4 through grade 3. No questions there, I don't think. JBR, equal educational opportunities, is the added timeline that was there. JFB is and the regulation that goes with it is the open enrollment policy. The district has not upheld the recommended deadlines because we do allow open enrollment students to come to us at any time in the year. We do have to post capacity, but we've never gotten to capacity. So those are just changes in name so that we can continue to offer open enrollment.
Well, it looks like you did remove the one for applications submitted by August.
Yeah,
15th.
that way we can continue to
Right,
offer
throughout
them,
the year.
right.
Yeah.
We do still have to legally say what our capacity is, but we don't have to have a deadline for meeting that capacity.
Okay, but this says honor before March 15.
We want the applications in by March 15th,
Okay.
but if you go down to when you're allowed to be admitted, it strikes the deadline of if they were submitted by August 15th.
Okay,
So if somebody submits an open enrollment today, we could take it for this year.
okay.
Okay, and then, open enrollment, we already went through that one. And then the next one is student publications. Wait, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Student publications, JICE. We just changed that student publication to submit them to the principal for approval, not the superintendent. I don't have time to read all the newspapers and everything, and it makes sense that the principal, because should there ever be anything that violates policy, it would be the principal that deals with that one. And then we struck that, this one, the regulation's not needed because all that was in that regulation was what's in the policy. And then tobacco use by students, we did the cross-reference to it. Just a few changes to that one. And then drug and alcohol use by students, took out the part of age 18. I think that was a little bit old that we could allow that to happen. So that was probably something that could have been caught before. Contests for students, just change the verbiage to make it from the high school to the district. Just that one was a simple cleanup. Okay, JJJ, we made some pretty significant changes and recommendations. ASBA made a bunch of, the bulk of these suggestions came from ASBA. We did meet with, I met with the leadership team at the high school because this is really about eligibility for interscholastic athletics. The goal of a policy is quite often to be as simple as possible, and then the regulation tells us how to enact the policy. This policy, while really stated what we believed as a district, really got into a lot of regulation on how we do it. So some of the recommended changes we've made to clean up the language to make sure it's not written like a regulation, but also to remove some possibility of some barriers for some students, especially high school students, who might find themselves in a credit deficit, and we're weighing the option, are they going to graduate because they get to play sports, or are they playing sports because they can get to graduate? And we want to make sure they can do both, because the end result is playing sports and graduating and taking down some of those barriers. We will honestly take a look at this again in the fall, just to make sure it's still aligned with what we are in practice. The student handbook, as well as the athletic guidelines for athletics, will kind of define some of these things a little more thoroughly, to make sure that all athletes know it's a 1-week eligibility period, but there could be some change in that.
That's what I was going to, because you said a lot of the stuff was covered under regulations, but this isn't really regulations, but like the student handbook and athletic.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a specific athletic handbook. I apologize for not knowing that information. I know our student handbook outlines how participation in any extracurricular event, and so that, and any document that we publish as a school district and we follow has the force of policy. So if we have a student handbook, it's doing the same thing this policy is, as long as it's in line with the policy. So if we say for athletics, you have to be eligible every week, and that's in the handbook, even if this just says eligibility period, it's 1 week.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I know Joe probably remember, well, most of us all remember this one was gone over quite in depth last year.
Yeah.
And so, well, if we have to tweak it, the way it is now, it's fine. Review it next summer before the next school year, we might have to do that.
Yeah, this one was last adopted on June 27th of 2019. So it's been recently looked
Right.
at.
Right.
Yeah.
It was tweaked a lot back then.
Yes, it was.
This, I like, this is clean. I like this.
I tend to gear towards more simple policies and complicated regulations
Right,
because
right.
I agree.
it provides us with
If you can't understand them, how do you follow them?
it makes it a little more flexible for us and able to kind of really fine tune what we need.
Yep.
Okay, JKR, student discipline. I believe we just added the part about personal electronic instruments and communication, so, and whether they're used during the day. That has changed over the course of years for schools. They used to not be allowed on campuses at all, and now we use them for learning devices. And then we had to add the part about confinement with implementation of mandatory provisions in case we isolate or confine a student. Doesn't happen a whole lot, but occasionally we do need to take care of that one. Okay. Whew. Okay, JKBR, detention of students, just changed the timeline for who notifies when kids are going to be held for detention. JLCD is a regulation about administering medicines to students, and this is primarily to address diabetic students, and this is really required under law for us to follow these regulations as it's written. Again, it's a regulation. The good thing is now we have a district nurse, so our district nurse has reviewed this and said this is what we need to be doing, so I think we're good to go on that reg.
Good.
And then student automobile use and parking, JLIER, is a regulation that just added in the reference to the revised statute that allows an owner of property to tow a person's vehicle at their expense. Our policy on this just has several lists. It just has 4 or 5 things that students must do if they want to use their vehicle on campus. So this regulation just gets a little bit deeper about allowing us to make sure they have registration and that understanding that we can search their vehicle and seize it. I don't think in practice we've ever towed a car, but this does allow us to do that. So they abandoned a vehicle on campus or something. The transfer of records, we just took out an old date that was added in. Somebody thought that was a good idea 100 years ago. Well, maybe 5 years ago, right? Said by this, and it's expired, so that's been updated. Parental involvement in education, there is a required section there that is based on Arizona updated Department of Education statutory regulations. We have to let them know where this is weird to me, that we have to tell them where to go to ADE to get that information. So it's our requirement to publicize what ADE has to publicize. So
Right.
that meets that statute. I questioned that for days. But we're doing what we're supposed to do. KEE is just an updated of some of these forms are filled to make sure we have the email address. Most people communicate via email, not snail mail, so we updated those. The next few exhibits are email addresses. And then we got to take out the one, I'm not sure why we had one about, the smoking on school premises. That was the next one. That's been deleted because it's all addressed in a
Because
different
it's okay now?
policy.
Huh?
It's addressed in a different policy, Miss Sandy. Distribution and promotion of materials. We don't distribute items for other people, so we struck out the language of distribution. We provide it and make it available. So we tried to catch all the distributions to keep us from distributing others' materials. And so there is actually an exhibit that goes along with that as well. And then the last one was relations with education accreditation agencies. The way this was written, it read that the school district had to seek the North Central, Cognia as the parent company of North Central, and the way this read was we as a district would have to seek the highest status of membership, and I don't believe we want all of our schools in the district to do that. So that's my recommendation on that one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But we definitely want the high schools. Okay, zipping through that, the last page are a list of policies that are currently in our manual that no longer exist, and they say refer to another policy, but those policies are wiped out, so all of those will go away and they will be sunsetted and cleaned up and no longer exist anywhere.
Yay,
Great.
good job.
Okay, so in summary, we have for the regular board meeting, where it's my understanding there will be some action to pull ADB for us to take a closer look at the principles of good education, and pull policy FF because it does not align with what we want to do.
Right.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. That'll make that action item go pretty quickly if somebody's prepared to do that.
Yes.
Okay? That's all.
Any questions or anything? We'll take a quick break.
Yep.
That took longer than I thought it would. I apologize. I'm so sorry. Boy, going through those quickly. I know.
This meeting to order for January 12th, and it is now 6:27. If you'll all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Thank you. All right, if we can get an adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries. So now we're moving into our organizational portion of the meeting. And the first item of business is we're going to elect a board president tonight.
I move to elect Joe as president.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome, Joe.
When's the parade? All right, scheduling of regular governing board meetings. Currently, we still have the same board. 3 of us are re-elected, but we have the same board. Anybody have any conflict with keeping the same week and then the same day and the 5:30 time?
No, I'm good.
You good with the same week and all that stuff? Ron, you have anything on that?
No, I'm good.
You're good? Susan's good? Okay.
I mean, that's way out, that's a long time out to, have any dates that's gonna be an issue for me.
Right.
Well, I was talking about the, wait, let me get back over here.
You're on the board schedule, right?
The
Well-
second
For 21,
Tuesday of the month.
22?
No, we're not looking at that. We're looking at the actual day of the week that we meet is Tuesdays.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's the part
No,
we're not on that
Tuesday-
schedule.
Oh, Tuesday, 5:30 is good to me.
Okay. And the third week of each month is good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Does that work for everything that you need to do to get from us the third week? Okay.
And then when it isn't, then Aaron usually, we switch it up or do a telephonic, correct? Okay, so everybody's good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I do need a motion for that part.
I'll make a motion to select Tuesday as the day of the week on the third week of the month at the time of 5:30 PM as the day and time of regularly scheduled governing board meetings unless otherwise noted on the board meeting schedule, and approve the 2021-22 board meeting schedule beginning July of 2021 and ending June of 2022 as submitted.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Now we've got our board operating protocol. And I guess everybody had a chance to look at that a couple times over.
Yep.
No surprises in there. Anybody want to carry on with a motion on that, or do we have anything to bring up on that?
I'll make a motion to approve the board operating protocol as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And the conflict of interest statements, we've taken care of that part already. So there's no motion needed on that. We've turned those into our board secretary, Lynn Green. So that being said, the organizational part of the meeting is completed. Thank you for that. And now we will get into item 3, informational and discussion items. We have a presentation from on student achievement from Ms. Debbie Hodgkiss, Executive Director of Educational Services.
Well, good evening, President Malio, members of the board, and Dr. Remendini. It is my pleasure to be part of this evening, and I am not really excited about showing you the data, but it's nothing we didn't expect. We've had a really tough year with COVID and school closure, and there are some bright spots in our data. So we had a conversation with Dan Paris from Virginia. They took our data as well, and they crunched the numbers, and they have access to more schools. And they said, look, everybody projected it to be rough. You did not lose as much learning as some schools. So that was a little silver lining, we'll take it. So we administered a pre-test in September. And we looked at those numbers and we thought those aren't too bad, but we knew the students were at home. And then we administered another test at the end of November. And the first slides that I'm going to show you are comparing those two assessments. Okay, we're looking at growth. So Festival Foothills, excuse me, I'm gonna
Still there?
Yes, this
Go
is
ahead.
Festival Foothills. This is the first slide, and this is their categorical growth summary. So what we are looking at is their daily growth.
Speak a little louder, Debbie.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're looking at their daily growth. All classrooms and subjects maintained growth at Festival except for one, the one you see in the blue. They actually exceeded expected growth. Typically, when we look at these slides for between benchmarks, we see a lot more blue, but green is still good. They're maintaining growth. Haciampa Elementary, majority of it is also green, so they're maintaining expected growth. We had one classroom exceeding expected growth and only one not maintaining expected growth. And typically, we have a few classes that may not maintain expected growth in a normal year. So this is good. Vulture Peak Middle School, also, the majority of the graph shows that the school maintained growth, with one exception that did not maintain growth. And Wickenburg High School is a similar scene. Majority of the classrooms, all except for one, maintained expected growth. We had one classroom that did not maintain growth.
What does that mean? Like,
So what that means is each day, Galileo statisticians, they give, the students should grow a certain amount each day between assessments. And there's a target number that they're trying to meet. If they meet a number or a range, then they've met the expected growth during that time period. If they do not meet that range and they're below or above, then they either exceeded or they did not maintain. So that is their daily growth rate between assessments. Okay?
So there's three classes of Algebra 1 at the high school. Is that what this is saying? And there's one of those class groups that didn't maintain growth?
What it is there's three teachers that teach Algebra 1. So these are actually teachers. So there is one teacher that possibly one of her classes did not maintain growth. It's an average, but each line is a teacher and a content area.
Okay. So that teacher has more than one Algebra 1 class?
Possibly.
Okay.
One thing that we can tell by our data is our littles, primary grades, probably have suffered the worst when it comes to not having face-to-face instruction. This is our first grade proficiency. In first grade, we do reading through our fluency. That's not what's being reported up here like our dibbles in the past. This is just Galileo. So this is a Galileo assessment in math. We did not do a pre-test. As you can imagine, a multiple choice pre-test at home with parents trying to monitor that. We did not do that, so we don't have comparison data to they were not on the first graph. But this is their proficiency, so how many students met or exceeded the benchmark in first grade, and you have a 3-year comparison. So your light blue is from 2018-19, your dark blue is from last year, and the yellow or gold is from this year. And then I broke it up by school so you can see festival and Haciampa.
Sad day.
Second grade proficiency, we do reading, ELA, and math. So the first 2 columns or categories are festival and Haciampa, that's the ELA, that's the reading. And then the last 2 are festival and Haciampa's math.
So in the lower grades, do we have a lot of children who are not proficient in speaking English? Or,
That's a great question. We don't have a lot of children in our EL rooms, so the speaking English hasn't been measured at this time, as far as comparison. The Azella assessment will be administered in February. Maybe it might go into March a little bit. So by May, we will have data as to how well our EL students are doing. So third grade proficiency,
Wow.
it's a little different story for that grade level. Festival and Haciampa ELA both increased from the prior 2 years. Festival math, and then Haciampa math at the end.
And is this comparing the prior year's data for third grade? Is that still the Galileo?
Yes, yeah, so this is the exact same test and I want to say the exact same time, but approximately the
Yeah.
same time. Okay, and I won't even say it's the exact same test, but it's the same format, similar standards. The questions may have changed, but yes, we are comparing the same assessment. Fourth grade proficiency, festival ELA and Haciampa ELA, and then festival math and Haciampa math. And then fifth grade proficiency. So that's our K-5 data. The 6-8 will be the same format, except for we'll switch to Vulture Peak. So we have Festival and Vulture Peak ELA at the beginning, and then their math scores at the end. And then 7th grade proficiency. Math. And math in both areas from in comparison to last year, both went up a touch.
And this is percentage based, meaning 100% they know everything they should know at this time of year?
It's not. This is based on the developmental level score in Galileo. So
Okay. Okay.
we then look at proficient and highly proficient.
Okay.
So those are the 2 categories that you're seeing displayed here.
Gotcha.
So we do have students that are partially proficient as well,
This is just a percentage of the total that are highly
or proficient.
proficient.
Yes. So they're passing.
Okay. Makes sense.
And here's 8th grade data. So with K-8, they both ELA and math are assessed for each student. So it's nice and clean. High school, it's not as clean. We have our ELA that follows a grade band, which is, 9, 10, or 11. But our algebra, geometry, algebra 2, that's a mixture of students. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion about that, but the graphs are going to look a little different. We did not assess science this year. Typically, we would do that in 4th and 8th grade, and then biology. We will do it this next benchmark, but science, the science assessment, AIM Science, was retired this fall. So they did not have an assessment that aligned to the new science assessment, so we chose not to assess. They did develop 3 assessments that we can use on the new science standards this coming month. So that's the plan.
And then you can give us sort of a proficient or highly proficient.
That's the hope, yeah.
percentage.
It should follow the same format as this, but I haven't dug into the new Sci, AZ Sci test, so I'm not sure if the performance levels are the same, but they should be close. So with the high school, let's look at the ELA first. So ELA 9 and ELA 10 are the two. We also do test ELA 11, but their data doesn't come out nice like this because it's comparison to the ACT. So there's not really a cut score as far as where proficiency is. But ELA 9 and 10 follow the same format as the other grade levels. And ELA 10 is what will be, or I'm sorry, let me back up. 10th grade, those students will be tested in the spring on the AZM2. Okay, regardless of what subject area they're in, but most of them are in ELA 10 if they are in 10th grade. And the ELA department at the high school, I'll just share a little piece of information. They've been working with some curriculum from a school in Wyoming that is a high-performing school. And so they met up with them at a PLC conference, and they have been working together to revamp some things. And I think they're starting to see some fruits to their labor. They didn't see the same dips. So we have algebra, geometry, and then we have a test called integrated. What we did is integrated is similar to the AZM2 test. Last year would have been the first year that they would have administered the integrated test, which is geometry and algebra standards, to our 10th graders. But obviously the tests were canceled, so we don't have any data on that. So this year will be the first year that we will take it. We didn't have any comparison data for the second benchmark or this first benchmark that we did in November. So it's, but we do have, we did administer the integrated test this year. The reason geometry looks like a 0 is because the majority of the students in geometry are in 10th grade. So they didn't take the geometry test, they took the integrated test. Okay, so the students that did take the geometry test would have been some of your upperclassmen that were retaking it for a better grade, that type of thing. So that's why geometry looks somewhat odd there. So that most of our 10th graders, all of our 10th graders, regardless of the content that they're enrolled in, they're in that that integrated test. The algebra 1, the geometry, there are no 10th graders in those courses or in those assessments. Okay, so it was a kind of a quirky little scheduling trick, but I think we made it happen. This was the first year that we used Galileo with Wickenburg Virtual Academy. And so one of the challenges with Wickenburg Virtual Academy, and I'm going to use that 6th grade as an example, is you're testing such a small percentage of students. It's really skews the data. So next year we could compare that, and we could have 2 students, and 1 student pass and 1 student not, and you have 50%, and you feel like you've just, been cut in half. Well, and that's not actually the case. You can also see the geometry score up there is 0. It's because the same concept was applied. 10th graders took the integrated, and that's the last score up there. So there's a limited number of students. The blue is our ELA. So this is what's coming up in the state assessment. They are scheduled throughout the next few months. We will be doing a benchmark assessment again at the very end of January. Our teachers will be working on February 5th, looking at that data, doing a deep dive, and creating action plans in order to determine what interventions need to happen, what instruction needs to happen leading up to the next state assessment. They target standards, they target students, they create small groups, they determine what needs to be taught large group, working with strategies, and other engagement activities. AZM2, which used to be AZ Merit, in grade 3, that one will go from April 5th to April 30th. The state board has decided to extend the window for the other grade levels so they can test all the way into May, which will end May 15th or May 14th. AZ Sci, which is brand new, this is just a field test. It won't be included in our accountability except for, well, depending on how they use accountability this year. But it's 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, and that's new.
Now, when it says field test,
It's the sample test. It's the first one out. Yeah.
you know, I'm thinking you go out
Oh, wouldn't that be
in
fun?
the field.
If we
and
could just
do
go out
something.
and do, performance-based activities for assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not that much fun. They're just testing it.
Okay.
So that's March 22nd. So as soon as we get back from spring break to April 30th. Azella, that's the assessment that we use to assess the ELLs. The window is really large, but we want to stay away from test fatigue, so we'll probably administer that in February and before spring break. We won't take advantage of that in that huge window because we don't want to be testing upon testing. And then the MSAA, that is an assessment for our students with significant special needs. And so we have, I'm not sure if the science one is in there now, but that'll be ELA and math for sure. Okay?
And if I may,
I have a question. I have a question.
Yes.
Do we know how is the state going to look at these tests? Are they just doing the tests so we can see kind of progress or how things are going during this COVID year, or are they going to look at the test scores like it was a normal year?
Thank you, Ron. I think that's a great question. The state board has proposed that they do want to test this year, but they do not want to administer letter grades this year.
so I can provide some update. That's what I was going to interrupt
Please.
and say.
Please.
So legislatively, we do expect some bills to address the A through F, and there's going to be a bill proposed. I don't know how far it'll make, just to give us a 2-year moratorium on the A through F label. But remember, that is a federal requirement. So it's going to take some action at the federal level to get us out of that accountability. There are two sides of the coin in that districts and people responding need an assessment because we need to know where we are. We need to be held accountable, and we don't shy away from accountability. What we just don't want is the high stakes, the slap on the wrist, the let's get through this process and see where we can go, because we know our teachers can teach. We know our kids can learn. We've put a pause in some things. So we expect some things to happen at the federal and the state level legislatively. You can see on Debbie's presentation here, we are preparing for the assessments as they are identified now. And if we get some relief from that before then, we will do that. I hate to anticipate. The lobbyist groups on both sides of the issue are pretty strong right now. And the houses are divided in Arizona and at the federal level. So we'll see what happens.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
So I spoke to the principals about the action plans that they've put in place since the November assessment, or what teachers are working on. Again, February 5th, we will revisit these plans and look at new data and make some more. At the high school, second semester, they blocked a geometry class and an algebra class to provide some more instruction for students who were struggling first semester, so those kids could earn a credit at the end of this year. Schedules also provided, they looked really closely at the students and their needs and tried to group students according to needs when they were making those new schedules. The PLCs, so our teams are targeting students as well as standards based on the data that they find in these assessments and other assessments. And then 21st Century, the high school is calling families and really encouraging students to take advantage of that extra tutoring time that they have available before and after school in order to help them close the achievement gap. For Wickenburg Virtual Academy, they're working with Edgenuity and the ELA teacher is looking at some of the rubrics that she thought the students would have, and then realized after the students did some writing assessments, they didn't have the rubrics available to them in the system. So she recreated those and made sure that some of those things are accessible to students while they're doing the projects. So they're just making a few curriculum adjustments to make it more student-friendly. We also found out that the testing window at the end of the semester is not a good fit for WVA. WVA is a pretty robust program, and the students are working diligently in order to complete their courses. But if you throw an assessment, and sometimes these assessments take a couple hours to do, then it causes a hiccup in the students, and some students just won't do it. So we want students to engage in these assessments. So we want to look at the scheduling in the future. Vulture Peak, students or teachers, and this is across the board, they're all using the intervention alert. That's a report in the Galileo system that will tell you how each student is doing on each standard. And so they're really looking at that. They're looking for mastery. Small groups are being created targeting students and standards. They're filling in the gap with reteaching. They're also using the IXL program, which is an intervention program where students can test in, and then they work at their level. So if there's gaps, they're working back on those gaps in order to create mastery on standards. Teachers are also looking at the pacing of standards. If they've already taught a standard and the students as a group did not perform well, then they'll be spiraling those back in daily reviews, things like that. And that pretty much follows across our elementary schools. Those PLCs work together. And then Festival, because of their small population, they go down really deep and they look at how that student has progressed from year to year to year. And they really work in that individual level or small group level, trying to close those gaps as quickly as possible. So that's kind of what's going on in our neck of the woods. And they typically, after this next benchmark, there may be some more creative scheduling or groupings in order to really close this achievement gap as quickly as possible before the state assessment.
And have teachers seen this?
This comparison, they have not seen the comparison.
Okay.
They have seen all of their data. They've already done the data dig with their data. Unless their principal provided them with a comparison at the December
fifth,
professional development.
But wouldn't it be nice to know this data?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Typically, we have it prepared. It was not prepared prior to the professional development day.
So
Yeah,
it,
we ended.
It will get to the teachers.
Yeah, I was teaching first grade, but we end the testing cycle, and the next day we have professional development.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not trying to make excuses, but
That's
I
okay.
really was in first grade.
And so they do have their own personal data. They
Yeah.
know how their own students performed, and during
Yeah.
PLCs, they may have discussed with each other how they've used that data or what that data says.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time at the December meetings in their PLC time, digging in deep to their individual data. This is something that pulls from the system after 3-year comparison. Okay. Any questions for me?
No, anybody?
All right.
Thank you, Debbie.
I
You're welcome.
just
Appreciate it.
hope the state doesn't come up with some stupid thing like they did last spring and say nothing counts, because I think that was our downfall. Still bothers me, I'm sorry.
I agree. All right, so our next presentation is update on the CARES grants, presented by Ms. Erin Johnson, Executive Director of Business Services. She's loading up her presentation.
At the bottom. You're at the very bottom, I think. Click at the bottom. No?
But we have it.
He's coming.
Oh.
Where is it?
You might not have loaded it because it wasn't set separately. Did you load it on there?
I didn't get it.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just in the board packet.
yeah, it's in a,
So, yeah,
Okay.
that's,
I sent it in.
Yeah, but I think
It's
the
been in the
mistake was the
packet.
communication
It's okay.
was not Jeremy go into the board packet and get it, so he didn't know there were two
No worries,
presentations.
they all have it on their surface.
But I'll bet you he can find it within seconds if he
Uh-huh.
logs in.
If it's in my email, I can find it.
It's not in your email, it's in the board packet.
Oh,
Can you go to,
Can
do
you
you
go
have
to
access
the,
to board docs?
Board doc.
Okay.
I just have to remember my password.
Yeah.
Oh, good luck.
Jeremy, I
I can
sent
log
it
in.
this morning at 9:56 a.m.
oh, you did send
To
it?
my email? Okay.
Uh-oh.
That was not me. I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay, they all have it.
It's only a couple pages and we have it.
Yep, on my word.
Aaron's presentation.
Yay.
There it is.
Just like somebody said.
That's right.
Good job, Lynn.
You just need to stay forever. At least till we can go to meetings together again.
They have it, so it's fine. We're good.
No.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Good job,
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
You've been busy. You've been very busy.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Remendini, thank you for allowing me to give you an update on some CARES Act funds that the district received last school year and this school year. So we were, there we go. We were the recipients of two different grants. One was the Enrollment Stabilization Grant, also known as ESG. This particular grant was designed by the governor's office to try to help with the shortfall of declining enrollment. And it had a very short window, as you all know, on the time frame of when we could expend it. So I'll give a little more details on that in a moment. The other was the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Grant, also known as ESSER, and that one was a federal funded grant, but it was funneled to us through ADE. And that one actually has a longer time frame to expend, which is great. So first things first is the ESG grant. So that one was technically to be spent from March. You could use the funds anywhere from March 1st of 2020 till December 30th of 2020. However, we didn't know our dollar amount till beginning of December and then had to spend it by December 30th. Not December 31st, but December 30th.
Wow.
We had a plan in place. Debbie Hotchkiss and I worked together to ensure that we had a plan in place and were able to expend those funds. So even though we didn't know the dollar amount, we had an idea and knew what we were working with. So we received $474,365.35. Don't want to forget that. And so we were able to spend over $165,000 on salaries and benefits. So we were able to shift quite a few salaries over there. Mostly what I did was during the time frame of our shutdown. I didn't use any of this money from last year's expenditures just because that gets a little wonky. I would have had to revise my budget and all. I just didn't see it was necessary. So for example, while we were remote learning, until October, we had bus drivers that were working and doing duties outside what their normal job would be. So I shifted what they were paid from August until when they normally would have started in August through October, through fall break, and shifted their salaries that way. We also had paraprofessionals that were assisting in ways that they normally wouldn't have. They were in learner labs, they were doing small group work. We had preschool instructors that were in classrooms because they couldn't have preschool. So all of those kinds of salaries were shifted over. So that was nice to be able to use it for that. Over $200,000 we used for supplies and instructional aids. So your cleaning supplies, things of that nature, gloves, masks, all of that fun stuff that we had to purchase, as well as the instructional aid part was I was able to shift what we normally would have used, capital money for Eureka Math, IXL, those kinds of expenditures. I was able to shift those over to this fund as well. So it freed up some money for us. And then we spent a little over 81,000 on technology and some capital items. So we were able to buy some computers, webcams, microphones, water refill stations. Down at Festival, they had the space for sinks in some of the classrooms, but the sinks and the cabinetry and things weren't there. So we were able to purchase those so that kids could wash their hands right in the classroom and refill their water bottles right there. And then the other, I wanted to leave you guys hanging there and give you some specifics on that.
That was my
20,
question.
yes, 20,000 of that 24 was for our trust endorsement to protect us against COVID.
Nice.
So I was able to use these funds for that trust endorsement.
That's great.
So the other $4,695 was used, as you recall, we had water samples done before we reopened school to make sure, our water was healthy for everyone to use, so we did that. And then we also used the remaining of it for the distance learning playbooks. So that was for employee training. So we were able to use it for that as well. So definitely put that grant to good use and spent every penny of it. Had a lot of work with journal entries and a lot of hands that played a part in making sure all of that happened. I joked around at cabinet a couple weeks in a row and, Aaron, what are you working on? And I would hold up my stack of journal entries to the camera and go, this, So took some time, but well worth it for sure. So definitely assisted us. As far as the ESSER grant goes, so those expenses were, again, from March of 2020, and they go through September of 2022. So we do have more time to be able to spend those funds. We did use a portion, just under 10,000, last fiscal year in FY20 on some salaries. So towards the end of the year, we had various things going on. We had some trainings and things and some extra work that employees had to do. So we were able to use those funds for that, and that was reflected on the AFR back in October. We've used about $8,300 to date in supplies and instructional aids again. So some of those programs, we've shifted some funds to for Edgenuity, for IXL, all of those supplementals. And then the additional supplies that we normally wouldn't have purchased. So what I've directed maintenance for is, what we normally would purchase for trash bags, paper towel, cleaning supplies, those need to stay where they normally would. But anything above and beyond, we need to be coding to these grants. And so that's what we've been doing. We have about $75,000 is encumbered for various salaries and benefits that do include our new district nurse and our additional teaching positions that we have for some of those online or remote learners. I do anticipate we have about $165,000 left in ESSER, and so we'll be working together to make sure, and like I said, we've got until September of 2022 to spend those funds, but I do anticipate those being spent on any additional salaries and training that we might need, or if we have to grab any additional staff if something should happen again, as well as any additional supplies that we might need in the future. So I don't think our cleaning protocols and things like that aren't going to go away, and so we have to continue to sanitize and use our fogger machines that we purchased and things like that help with that. So, and then obviously, as I indicated, the 100% of the ESG grant was spent. So with that, any questions? I try to go fast because we're behind and
No,
I
it's
talk
great.
fast anyway.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, you went through everything.
At
Great.
what date did we get these grants? Because I know we didn't get them in March, in first March. You had to.
Yes, they were
Back.
backdated. As far as, do you remember when we were awarded ESSER,
The
Debbie?
answer might have come in May or June. It was at
Yeah.
the very end of the fiscal year. last
Okay.
year.
Yeah, it was pretty late.
Yes.
Pretty late. Debbie went through the process and applied for it through grants management. But once we finally got our allocation and everything, it was, quite late in the year. So everything was, you could spend it retroactively for both grants, which is great. Some school districts really took advantage of that. We were fortunate enough that I didn't have to, do a lot of that and really tried to start as much as I could July 1st, just because of the timing. So,
Do we
Yeah.
have any other grants like this that we've applied for?
well, there is another round of ESSER coming out. It's called like ESSER 2. or something
We
like
actually have
that.
a funky acronym that begins with
ESSER.
something else.
I
We're
don't
trying
know.
to fix
I'm just
like
calling it-
CASR or something like that.
Yeah,
and
I'm
it's-
calling it
yeah.
ESSER too
Yeah.
for now, but.
That's the easy one.
That, we've been hearing mutterings of it. Dr. Remendine might have a little bit more information on it, or Debbie, but, you know, we will, from what I understand, we will receive it. I don't know how much, I don't know when. I don't have all of those details yet. I do have a bi-monthly meeting tomorrow with business officials, and ADE typically attends those meetings, so I'm hoping that they have a little bit more information and an update on that. But that would, you know, give us more, and from what I understand, that one would expire in September of 2023. So it's even another year longer, which is great. Yeah, because and that's really the focus is going to be on that one, is bridging that gap, that learning gap for these kids, and make up for some of the loss. And so that's where those funds will really need to go.
They still all fall under the CARES.
Yes.
It's the second round, and it's
Well, like the
anticipated.
second stimulus,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yes.
anticipated to be
Still
much more than this one, but
Yes.
that's remains to be seen how, because these are always flow through the governor's office, so what is peeled off for different things, but with an anticipation that it will be more and with a longer period of time. And the same expenditures that we could use under ESSER 1, we can use under ESSER 2, but the push is going to be closing the achievement gap.
Right.
So we've had some preliminary conversations about what does that mean for Wickenburg and what other resources we will need to ensure that our teachers have what they need to, and our students have what they need. So that's coming as fast as we can get the money and determine what that is.
Yeah, I'm very anxious to see that, and I'm glad that we can have those funds to use, you
For
know,
a couple of years.
for those needs. This has been great, the ESG, because it's helped to supplement our enrollment loss.
Right.
You know, without that, it would have been very difficult to go into next year, you know, with any rainy day fund, or, you know, potentially even make it through this year. So that has really, really helped with that. And then just, you know, making sure that our facilities are sanitized and clean and people are safe. So I'm glad that there's more funds coming to assist with bridging those gaps.
When those funds sunset, whenever that is, and hopefully it's not a long time, hopefully it's a long time from now, are we going to be able to sustain a district nurse at that point if those funds don't keep coming in?
I'm not sure. You know, a lot of that will just be dependent on sectioning and staffing, enrollment, you know, what the needs are. I hope so. I think that it's a great asset. I think that it's something that's needed. And so I think with these grant funds, we'll be able to sustain it
Right.
for a little while longer. At least that's part of my goal, and I think others as well. But after that, you know, it's hard to say. I wish I had a crystal ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, because schools always used to have
Right.
a nurse.
Yeah.
I mean, Mrs.
Well, you know,
Snodgrass
yeah.
was the nurse here forever.
Yeah, I would put it as a priority, as not just to deal with the pandemic, but to address the needs of students that we see that are, you know, coming to us with higher needs and medical needs, and making sure that we feel comfortable and confident that we can meet their needs in-house, rather than servicing them through another district or whatever. So
Right.
it's unfortunately, we don't have an unlimited supply of money, so it is a priority though.
Just wait till I win the lottery.
Oh, will you
Probably-
share?
To look something similar as to, you know, having our security officer, our SROs now, get those, and,
Right.
you know, maybe
Yep.
they, ASBA or ADE, somebody, you know, look at that for all schools. because
Yeah.
It's an essential position, I think.
Well, and more, beyond the pandemic and things, more and more children are having, you know, health issues or require medication and things, you know, and so we want to make sure that they're being properly taken care of and those medications are properly distributed and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, that was my thought. Kids nowadays have many more medical needs than they used to.
Right.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
wonderful.
But I have just a kind of a general question that, and probably more for Dr. Remendini maybe, but any intel on the governor's comment that they're not going to fund empty seats is that a stab at the virtual learning or what?
That was a direct, an indirect response about remote learning. Right now, our remote learners, we earn the same ADM. They count for the same ADM as our virtual academies, and so at 95% funding. I believe that that is not on his wish list, that kids will be back in school. I expect quite a bit of chatter, and some lobbyist groups have already put out some videos, and that one will be a little bit, the funding formula to address remote learning as a continuous option, whatever that looks like by individual school districts, is still high on the priority list of many education advocacy groups. So there will be some pressure from the legislators to kind of address that. And there will be a bill, I'm trying to look at my notes, I can't read my own handwriting. I do believe there is actually a bill already that is not, none of the bills for this session have been assigned to committee yet, but I do believe there is one to, that's being written or formulated to address funding related to remote learning. I don't anticipate any changes for virtual academies such as WVA. I think those will remain 95%, but there will certainly be a push to get 100% funding for remote learners, or at least 95% instead of 0, right? So we'll see.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right.
I know. I know, it's an icicle.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah,
So-
why is it so cold in here?
Next section is recognitions and proclamations. If anybody from the board has anybody or any event to recognize?
I have something to say.
Yes.
I would just like to recognize that Colleen Peterson was,
Educator of the Year.
Yeah,
yes, thank you.
you took mine.
I was there.
I knew we did.
Or as Jerry Brooks says, Urgicator.
Educator. Yes. So I just wanted to say congratulations.
Good, thank you.
And I was very happy to hear the AIA reversed its decision on winter sports, so that's amazing.
It's going to be interesting.
And they said 2 parents per student can attend events, so.
I don't know how, I think I saw one thing that said that some of the requirements, now the students are going to have to be masked to perform the sports event.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a little interesting.
So, and I have a friend in Florida whose daughter plays volleyball, and she's in a private Christian high school that plays volleyball, and they do wear masks, and I saw a video of
that's-
it.
That's cool.
And
the nephews too, in Michigan.
they're surviving and getting to
We'll see for
play,
how long.
so,
Is it-
Yeah.
Sucking in all that crap that you're putting out while you're
yeah.
exerting yourself.
But I would like to also use this time, as we have in the prior months, to recognize all of our staff for toeing the line and keeping us going and fighting a good fight. I really appreciate each and every one of them, so.
And I would like to say thank you to Joe Malio for agreeing to take on the presidency for another year.
You're welcome.
Joe.
He'd be
It pays
disappointed.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 200% of your current board member income, right?
That's right.
And Joe, I do.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. I do have a couple of items of note. I do want to, again, echo my recognition for our staff and students for a smooth return after winter break. We remain optimistic that we can remain in person for the remainder of the school year serving our students, and as long as we keep following our mitigation strategies and dealing with each situation individually, we should be able to do that. I also had congratulations to Colleen Peterson for the Chamber Educator of the Year, and I appreciate Sandy for attending that event with us as we froze in the wind Saturday night because it was outside and it was very cold, but it was lovely. It was wonderful.
Not
It
as
was-
cold as Missouri was.
well, that's true. And just some more recognitions. As part of our annual holiday celebration, staff of the district office participated in a virtual white elephant silent auction gift exchange. Yes, all of those all of those adjectives. The event raised over $300, which we donated to Cops Who Care, a nonprofit organization supporting local family needs. And it was really a lot of fun. And Aaron Johnson got the prize that everybody voted for, bid on. It was back and forth bidding. So January has been declared Speak Up, Stand Up, Save a Life Month by the Wickenburg mayor. So that is the official January month. Students from Wickenburg High School, Wickenburg Virtual Academy, Vulture Peak, and Festival Foothills Elementary School will attend the 5th annual conference on January 19th to be held virtually. And this movement was started to empower students to have confidence and the ability to reach out to adults in times of need. And this is a movement that was started in Arizona, and we're very fortunate, since it's being held virtually, that our students will be able to attend. So we invited all 8th through 12th graders, and there will be some adult sessions as well. So our counselors, our social worker, our leaders will attend this as well, so that we can help them speak up and save themselves. That is all. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank
I
you.
want to know what the prize was.
Oh. Well, there were lots of different items, because it was white elephant, you know, so they're just numbered it under a tree. So you had to bid, and then the money that you bid went to Cops Who Care. And it was just at the district office. So I should have brought it or had a picture of it, but what got me wanting to bid on it was there's this little squirrel that was tied to the package. And every time I walked by, that little squirrel just made me smile. And I'm like, I need that squirrel in my office because I need something to look at to make me smile. And so I outbid everybody on that one. Dr. Remendini wanted to fight me for it, but I outbid her and I got it. But the prize, it was actually Valerie Shumway's, was the Baconator. And so you can make bacon on this thing. So I didn't care about the Baconator. Matt liked it, but I wanted the squirrel.
Okay, great.
I'm a proud owner.
I hate hearing half a story.
Yeah.
I want the
Come
whole
see your
Last year,
squirrel.
I was the proud recipient of a tape dispenser that looks like a dog that someone in this room keeps threatening to steal from my desk.
Debbie.
So I'm trying to guard my squirrel and my dog now.
Dr. Remendini has keys to everything. It may be a conspiracy.
I'll know where to look.
All right, so going on with our consent agenda, I will be,
Would you like to
does
hit number
anybody need
4?
to, what's that?
Number
Oh,
4.
yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't see people, so. We do have our section for call to the public. Thank you, Randy. And everybody else that barked at me. Do we have anybody in the public that wishes to speak?
I thought we just had people here. Oh,
Okay, we
Okay.
have none. So I'll proceed. Is that okay, Randy?
You can proceed now,
Thank you.
Joe.
All right. Anybody have anything that they need to pull off the consent agenda before we take action on it?
okay, is this the time to pull it? Okay, no? Yes.
This is an action item. Or you have something?
Consent agenda item
Consent
D
agenda?
is the templates for the
Oh, the
contracts.
template for that one.
Yes.
We do have something to pull.
It is?
Yeah,
See, I don't think it's.
the template, yeah, it's for, that's right, okay.
Oh, yes, I forgot
So we
about
do
that.
need to pull
That was
off
my thing.
item D. I had this all for the action items. Oh, my glad you were sitting there going like this.
Thank you, yeah.
All right, so we are pulling that one off. Does anybody else have anything else that they need pulled before we take action on the rest of the consent agenda? Okay?
Okay, so this is going, this ADB and this FF?
That's on action
That's
item.
separate.
That's separate, that's the next section. So we can get a motion for the rest of the consent agenda if,
Yes. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items for January 12th, 2021 minus item D.
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Okay, item D was pulled. Did you want to speak?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, after we published the board agenda, we noticed, thanks to some cautious eyes on our product, that there is a typo on the template that is posted for the Human Resources Consultant contract. That should be just a template without any names, dates, times, or anything. So we do need to we request that that template remove the name and the number of days that we would be offering that or using that contract. So it truly becomes a template with blank items. So if we can get those removed, we can approve it as amended.
Okay.
Okay. So I can make a motion that we approve the 2021-22 teacher contract templates and the 2020-2021 consultant contract as amended.
Correct.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. All right, so action items, section number 6. We have Miss Erin Johnson and her financial report. Erin, you're on.
All right, thank you again. So still trending low on our year-to-date expenditures for the same reasons each month. You know, we just aren't doing as much. We don't have the salaries, we don't have the fuel, we don't, you know, we're just not going for activity. Now that, hopefully it's gonna pick up a little bit now that we have winter sports happening, so maybe we'll see a little more activity here. But also, you will see that in the hard numbers, not the dashboard, that our numbers are down too because of, over from last month, because I was able to shift so much to these other grants, begin doing that. So I was able to shift quite a few expenditures over there. So definitely looking good. I don't have our reduction in here yet for our enrollment, so that annual budget number that you see in there will go down. So our year-to-date percentage will go back up, but we'll still be trending well and have positive budget balances in compliance and no surprises to the best of my knowledge.
Beautiful.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the financial report as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you, Erin.
Erin.
Appreciate it. All right, so we are back to action item 6B, and let's see, I gotta see how this is worded in here. Need to pull policy ADB and policy FF,
Correct.
and we can take action on the rest unless, I mean, it's a first reading.
First reading.
That's
Yeah,
all.
first reading.
So, okay,
So to clarify, next month's second reading of these policies have no suggested changes. It will have policy ADB off and policy FF off for further review for ADB. Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Okay. And now we're at the items for future agendas. And we've got our calendar and announcements. I wish my calendar looked like that.
You could probably hire Lynn to do that.
I think I will. All right. So with that being said, we can move into item 8A.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries and we are adjourned. 7:25.
Bye, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye.